What if the EU isn't turning to China for its future, but to Canada? Forget the usual alliances. In June 2025, the European Union quietly took a bold geopolitical step. It chose a new partner, and it wasn't Beijing. This isn't just trade, it's a pivot in power. The EU and Canada just signed a sweeping series of agreements that go far beyond diplomacy. Defense coordination, joint military procurement, rare earth partnerships, even a new digital trade alliance. At a time when China's grip on global trade is tightening and the US is inward-looking, Brussels and Ottawa are building something new. A different kind of power bloc, one that's democratic, coordinated, and surprisingly ambitious. So, what exactly did they agree to? Why is the EU suddenly choosing Canada over China? And could this shape a new economic order? One that quietly rewrites the rules of global influence? Let's break it down. The EU-Canada summit held in Brussels didn't make global headlines, but it should have. Here's what was signed. A security and defense partnership, giving Canada deeper access to EU defense systems. Talks on joint access to a €150 billion EU defense fund. SAFE, a new industrial policy dialogue to align critical industries. A roadmap for a digital trade agreement covering AI, cybersecurity, and tech standards. A deeper critical minerals partnership, especially rare earths and battery materials. Why does this matter? Because it's not just cooperation, it's integration. Canada will now help shape EU procurement policies, contribute to defense planning, and align certification standards in advanced tech. This is the first time the EU has offered this kind of deep, structural access beyond its neighborhood. What would happen if this alliance fails to deliver? Would Europe fall back into dependence on less trustworthy suppliers? It's strategic, it's long-term, and most importantly, it's not China. The EU has a China problem. Yes, China is Europe's largest trading partner for goods, totaling over €865 billion in 2023. But the relationship is tense. The EU has banned Huawei in 24 countries. A sweeping anti-subsidy investigation has targeted Chinese EVs and solar panels. In key capitals like Berlin and Paris, there's mounting pressure to de-risk. Public sentiment is shifting too. A 2025 Eurobarometer poll showed 63% of Europeans now view China as a strategic rival, up from just 38% 5 years ago. Brussels isn't looking for a breakup, but it is looking for options. Europe is heavily dependent on China for 98% of its rare earth supply, over 50% of solar panel components, critical AI chips, and lithium-ion battery inputs. What if China decided to cut off those exports tomorrow? And with the US becoming increasingly protectionist, imposing export controls, and prioritizing domestic reshoring, the EU needs its own routes. Could Canada become the new cornerstone of European resilience? So why Canada? Because it's trusted, resource-rich, strategically located, and eager to step up. First, critical minerals. Canada holds one of the world's most diverse and untapped arrays of critical minerals. It has 31 of the 50 minerals deemed essential by the EU. It's the only Western country with large deposits of cesium and tantalum, both crucial for 5G and aerospace tech. It's a global leader in responsible mining, with environmental and labor standards that match EU expectations. Already, over €3.2 billion in EU funding is earmarked for co-investments in Canadian rare earth processing facilities. Isn't this the kind of supply chain security the EU has long dreamed of? This is about more than supply. It's about sovereignty. Second, defense and procurement. Canada has been a reliable NATO contributor, especially in Eastern Europe. Its role leading the multinational NATO force in Latvia has gained Brussels' respect. Now, under the new agreement, Canada will gain observer access to key EU defense councils and contribute to multi-country procurement programs, from drones to missile systems. What happens if the SAFE Fund becomes the backbone of Europe's military strategy? Will Canada be seen not just as a partner, but a pillar? 3. Trade plus technology. CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, has been in force since 2017, but this new wave goes further. A proposed digital trade accord will create mutual rules for data transfer, encryption, and cloud storage. Joint projects are underway in quantum computing, biotech, and green hydrogen. There's talk of creating a joint innovation visa scheme, fast-tracking Canadian and European engineers to collaborate cross-border. Could this be the EU's path to tech independence without Silicon Valley or Shenzhen? This isn't just trade facilitation, it's geo-economic scaffolding. Make no mistake, this pivot is all about China. Unlike the US, which is taking an openly confrontational stance, tariffs, bans, military encirclement, the EU prefers quiet hedging. And this Canadian pivot fits the model. Rather than attacking China directly, the EU is building a web of alternatives. Japan, hydrogen tech and semiconductors; South Korea, AI, advanced robotics; Australia, critical minerals and energy; Canada, defense, regulation, and resources. Could these quiet partnerships have a bigger long-term impact than any trade war? Because China doesn't just dominate supply, it dominates refinement. 60% of global rare earths come from China, but over 85% of the world's refining capacity is under its control. What happens if China pulls a 2010-style export restriction again? Europe needs fallback plans, and Canada is becoming Plan A. This isn't just a bilateral story, it marks a shift in how power blocks form in the 21st century. Not around military pacts or ideologies, but around supply chains, standards, and infrastructure. In the last decade, China used the Belt and Road Initiative to lock in influence. Now, the EU is responding, not with megaprojects, but with modular alliances that create interdependence with trusted democracies. Expect more of these. Defense tech tie-ups with Taiwan, rare earth deals with Chile and Zambia, green energy corridors with North Africa. Could this be the future of global diplomacy? Less about treaties, more about transactions? Canada is just the beginning. And for other middle powers, like Norway, South Korea, or even Brazil, this sets a template. Align with Europe, trade autonomy for access, and become part of a values-based bloc without formal treaties. This isn't a military alliance. It's not a trade war. It's something subtler, but just as powerful. The EU and Canada are building a quiet bloc, built on aligned regulation, not domination, anchored in shared tech values, not ideology, focused on innovation, raw materials, and long-term resilience. It's not flashy. It doesn't dominate headlines. But in a world where supply chains are weapons, this alliance could shape who gets to write the next chapter of globalization. Because in 2025, while the world watched US-China tensions, Europe just made its boldest move yet.